Welcome to Dad Level Podcast. This week, I'm joined with my buddy Alex and Adrian, my other buddy, and we're going to be talking about fighting game memories and some of our favorite games and favorite events we maybe went to, and see how things play out.
Sounds great.
Yep.
So,
you want to get us kicked off, Vince? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, let's see. So, I remember the first time. And the first game I probably played a fighting game was either, what was it, Kung Fu? Or really, I mean, arcade-wise, it would have been Street Fighter. I remember, the funny thing is, I'm a Shoto player now, but back in the day, I played Guile.
You say you played Guile?
Yeah, played Guile.
I could never master that sonic boom. That's why my brother was good at it. I couldn't do it. So
it took practice, man. It took practice. I mean, I wasn't one of those guys that would, you just sit there and crouch in the corner and then throw the sonic booms until they would try to jump over it, and then you would do the flash kick. No, I wasn't one of those guys, unfortunately. I tried to go in. Actually, I didn't even know about that technique until like years later.
I think most people started off with Guile. I remember starting off with Guile as well, because he had the simplest inputs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why most people started off with Guile. But yeah, and the charge time thing, you have to get used to that. But you definitely have the simplest inputs. I remember the first time somebody told me how to do a dragon punch. I was like, you serious? This is how you do this thing? I could never pull that one off for a long, long time. But yeah, it was always Guile for me. You just sit back and wait on somebody to walk up on you and flash kick them. It was the best.
Yeah.
I actually use Ken a lot. I just like Ken because of the fact that he was fast. Like he could bounce all over the screen. I think everybody's first real fighting game was Street Fighter 2, real arcade fighting game. We can go back to Kung Fu. We can go back to the original Street Fighter 1, the arcade machine. The only place in Houston or Pasadena that I knew that had it was at Godfather's Pizza, the one on Spencer Highway. And I was like, what is this? Like, what game? I never heard of it before, and I was playing it. It was just, it was actually pretty cool. Like for what it was at the time, it was pretty interesting. Wasn't Street Fighter 2 like blew all the other fighting games out of the water, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it's funny. Oh, go ahead.
Along those same lines with Street Fighter 1, I didn't even know as a testament to how big, like you say, Street Fighter 2 blew up. It didn't even occur to me that there was a Street Fighter 1. That's how it was. And when I saw it for the first time, my mom sent me into a convenience store to get like something. I don't even remember what it was. And I turned the corner and there's Street Fighter 1. Like, what is this? There's a Street Fighter 1? And I remember getting in real big trouble because I put a quarter. I was supposed to go in there and get something, come out real quick. But I had to put a quarter in and try it out at least one time. And yeah, it was completely different. And this is years after Street Fighter 2 had been out and popular. And it never even occurred to me that there was a Street Fighter 1, that thing even existed. It just the title Street Fighter 2 was just like,
you thought it was like that was it.
And you didn't separate the fact that this was a 2 in it. It was just
Exactly.
Street Fighter 2. And so I didn't put together that there could even possibly be a Street Fighter 1.
What was funny because like I had the same memory when I first interacted with Street Fighter 1. So we used to live at Brandywood Apartments off of Spencer and Red Bluff area. So like we used to go to Deepwater Elementary, and I remember we would stop at the convenience store in the morning. Dad would like get us like a drink and some breakfast stuff, and there was a Seller Brothers right there that had the Street Fighter 1, and it wasn't the original one where it was 2 buttons that you had to mash depending on like how hard you mashed it for like the different like strengths. It was actually the 6-button layout one, and I was like, wow, this is cool. And then we played it, and then it wasn't until like later on when I got like a PC pack or whatever that had like all this like certain Street Fighters and some other Capcom titles. And I was like, oh, this is cool. So I was playing on my computer. But yeah, I remember it was different. It was very different.
Yeah, talking about it being different, like for me, the 2 things that really stood out, well, obviously 3 things, but one, the gameplay, right? It was just, it connected so well that when you pressed a button, you saw it react on the machine and you felt connected with the game. So the gameplay was like miles away from its competition. The soundtrack was incredible. I mean, like even today, I still like hum Zangief and Dalsim and all these like all the different characters' musics because they were so well made, right?
Yeah.
They can carry on for generations. And then the third part was like the diversity of characters. Like I love the fact that you had this little globe and you fly in this little tiny
Japan,
USSR. I think that's funny because I think about kids that were born, you know, let's just say even a person who's in their 20s, they're like, what's USSR, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But we remember the wall falling and everything. So like that's so interesting that there's like a piece of history there. That diversity of characters, it's just such an amazing title that still is relevant today.
Yeah, still. And those little touches are things that I really miss nowadays. That little bit of polish that that you saw in Street Fighter 2. Like nowadays, I feel like a lot of fighting games get away from each character having their something small as each character having their own individual stage. Like nowadays, you just get 5 stages. There's 23 characters in there, good luck, I guess. So, and those little touches, like flying to different places, I really miss that. And I think that's one of those things that they got, that used to be one of those little flourishes that got started by Street Fighter 2. And now we don't really, even in the latest Street Fighter, we don't really have it as much. And I kind of miss that.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I miss in fighting games in general is just being able to like unlock my characters instead of have to pay for it.
Sure,
I mean, I understand they're like, what was it? They just did the Tekken update with Lydia. She's pretty awesome. She's pretty awesome. But yeah, and I like the fact that like each character is getting their own stage in Tekken. But Street Fighter, it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna throw in some nostalgia here for you, and then you can either pay for it or grind for 100 hours to get enough BP points to.
Yeah, I like they tried to split the difference there with the grinding, but yeah, at a certain point, I mean, you're just climbing the mountain with that stuff. There's no way you could realistically grind out for all the DLC. And to a certain point, like the last time we talked, I'm okay. It is what it is. You have to. This is where we're living at now. You got to make some money back on some DLC, but try to strike some kind of balance there, where it's like, all right, let's get a realistic path to actually earn these characters instead of you could earn them, but you're really not gonna earn them.
Yeah. Which takes you back to a whole different point too, when like, the first time like Mortal Kombat came out. I mean, I remember I'm sitting at my dad's shop, Thorn Comics. We talked about it in the previous episode, and it's a comic book shop right over there by Southeastern High School, and I had a TV in there, and I'd be playing games while they were working through, putting like maybe we had stock came in. I don't remember what was going on, but I was playing Super Nintendo and Super Ghosts and Goblins, and some guy comes in. He's like, "Yeah, do you guys check out the new fighting game?" "What new fighting game?" "Yeah, Mortal Kombat. You like there are people ripping off heads and everything." And I'm like, "Okay, well that's cool, but how can you compete against Street Fighter?"
Yeah.
And then we went to Supertrack and started playing. I was like, man, this is amazing.
Sure. And did they really compete against Street Fighter? I know nowadays, Mortal Kombat probably outsells Street Fighter. But even back then, just like I was a Street Fighter purist, I was like, this Mortal Kombat is okay, but Street Fighter is where it's at.
The mechanics were so different, right? Like it was such a different game. And that's why it's hard to compare the two. Like Mortal Kombat was entertaining. So I remember when I'm just kind of thinking back PS3, that later version came out and it was like really graphic and extra gory and the fatalities are crazy. So I played it for like 3 days and I did most of the fatalities and I just got bored of it.
Yeah.
I didn't have like I didn't have a lasting desire to want to play it. It's like you saw the fatalities, then it gets too gory and it's just kind of ridiculous. And then you just want to go back to Street Fighter. Yeah,
Street Fighter definitely had that secret sauce, man. They really made you want to keep playing and then try out all the characters probably why I'm not a game designer. I can't put my finger on it. Even to this day, I can't put my finger on what it is about Street Fighter that makes it really replayable, even with the most current version, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, have come such a long way, especially on the Mortal Kombat here. But yeah, it was something there. It was just much more replayable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and a lot of it has to do too is the fact that you know what you're going into. You know what you're going to get. Even though the graphics have now changed where everything's kind of 3D, it still plays on that 2D feel. So the inputs are the same. You know, maybe the timing's a little off because now you're playing with controllers that are, you know, wirelessly. So there's an input lag slightly.
Yeah.
Versus if you're playing with a cable. But, you know, if you think about it too, it wasn't really, I mean, Mortal Kombat was great. And I know that the whole thing about the different versions on the Super Nintendo and Mortal Kombat was one of the reasons for, you know, the ESBA or the whatever, the ESRB. And, you know, the funny thing is, it's like, it wasn't really till 2 and 3 came out that Mortal Kombat really hit its stride. And, you know, you had like the hidden characters like Noob Saibot showing up and Jade and Reptile. Or no, what was it? There was one, I can't remember the other character. But
I think that was the only ones in 2, like Jade and Reptile and Noob Saibot were in 2,
but it was funny because I remember when 3 came out, again, it was at another comic book shop when I really kind of play it. But I remember it was really cool was that, so the shop off and all.
Sorry, Reptile was in the regular cast.
Yeah, he was in the regular part too. Yeah.
Jade, Noob Saibot. I want to say Scarlet was in 2.
So, I can't remember who I think there was 3 people, but it was funny because like Noob Saibot on the Super Nintendo, you had to like have 50 wins and he would just show up.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm sure that was like that in the arcade, but I don't remember. I mean, I remember playing a little bit of Mortal Kombat 2 competitively, but it wasn't really like 3 that I played a lot. Yeah. But when 3 came out, it was cool because they got it in the shop at the comic book shop on El Dorado, and it was cool because when it first came out, I got to play all the different versions. So it's like, you know, not all the characters were there, and then eventually like Smoke showed up, and then they did the Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and you know, all the different combos, and you know, the run feature and everything. It was just fun. I mean, I remember playing that heck out of that one.
Yeah.
My favorite characters were like classic Sub-Zero and Smoke and Liu Kang. But yeah, those were, I think that those first 3 games for Mortal Kombat were the best.
Yeah. You know, 2 things I want to touch on in regards to Mortal Kombat. For me, the movie was more attractive than the game. Like, I actually really love the movie, and I could watch it over and over. It was fun. But the game just didn't have that same appeal for me. Like, if I was at Vince's house, if I was at your house, you know, somebody's playing it, okay, I'll play a little bit, no problem. Like, I'm not going to be completely opposed to it. But if I had a choice, like, Street Fighter would definitely be my choice. And then, you know, Vince, you were talking about kind of like the evolution of Street Fighter and when it started getting into this more 3D model that we're seeing now. So me personally, the only kind of 3D version of Street Fighter that I really liked was kind of Street Fighter EX, because it was similar to that kind of Tekken layout, that platform, and I enjoyed that. But now what I see with your modern day Street Fighter, it's like it's kind of lost that, like, I would say kind of cartoony touch. Like Third Strike was the last great Street Fighter in my opinion, right? I love Third Strike. One, the soundtrack was there. Like, Third Strike stays true to the things that I loved about Street Fighter 2, because it had that amazing soundtrack. It was still that flat, cartoony, you know, 2D feel. Like the mechanics of it felt the same. The combos felt the same. So yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I haven't really played Street Fighter since Third Strike because I haven't really been that excited about the newest versions. And the soundtracks have changed and the vocals have changed. It's not that same kind of that dynamic it had before Third Strike.
Sure. Yeah, that's a lot of people's favorite.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
I feel like that's the definitive Street Fighter is Third Strike. But a lot of people like Street Fighter 4 for trying to go back to that original feel. And even that, you know, kind of went off the rails towards the different iterations and the different upgrades and stuff like that. But yeah, there's something about like those original Street Fighter 2, Super Turbo, Third Strike. It does feel, it feels really good, man. It feels like home.
Yeah, Alpha.
Alpha's great. Alpha's great too. Yeah. Alpha's great too.
Alpha had that added element of the random announcer guy, like,
yeah,
it's great, just random yelling out random stuff, and it just got catchy. You know, we've been talking about Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. These are big hit series titles. What about all those side titles that like people probably don't remember, but they were still great games? Like I'm gonna start it off with a side title.
Sure.
Like back in the day, Battle Arena Toshinden was one of those like, I could scoot around, like that was kind of cool. It was like Tobal number one, like those kind of games. They had this like different feel to it, and I think those are kind of predecessors to like the Soul Calibers and some of the more advanced titles from there.
Sure. Well, I'm gonna give you a deeper cut.
Ooh.
How about World Heroes?
Yeah, World Heroes.
Yeah. World Heroes. So that was side by side with Street Fighter 2.
Mm-hmm.
I loved World Heroes. I
Great
loved that game. I loved it. And it was basically just reskinned Street Fighter for a lot of it. But I liked it. I liked it a lot. And I remember I used to go to this place, it was called Sudsy's. It was on Southwest Houston. And it was a laundromat, a bar, and an arcade. The front of the place was a laundromat. They had a bar in the back, and on the side was a little arcade area. And of course, the Street Fighter 2 was closer to the front, and then Championship. It was like Street Fighter 2, and then Mortal Kombat came out and took the front slot, which I was offended by. And then Championship Edition came, and they moved the Mortal Kombat off to the side. I said, okay, it's back in its rightful place. And then on the other side were some of the SNK games like the World Heroes. But I love World Heroes, and I love like the original Fatal Fury. Those are my
Fatal Fury, man. And then
King of Fighters.
King of Fighters, and then Samurai Showdown. I mean, those games are like, I mean, every game that SNK was doing, like fighting game wise, was great. I mean,
they were cool. Like World Heroes was the only one that was just like more of a blatant ripoff of Street Fighter. Like the Fatal Fury and the King of Fighters and Samurai Showdown. Those were unique properties that were really good. And it shocks me sometimes they weren't more popular than what they were and what they are, but they were really good games.
I think a lot of it had to do with because even like at Supertrack, I mean, you really only found like SNK stuff at like bizarre places like bowling alleys or convenience stores, maybe at a washateria. I think the first like iteration I've ever played of an SNK arcade cabinet was at a thrift store. There was one right there on Shaver and Spencer. I was at Alameda or Alamo thrift store or something like that. I can't remember. I know my grandmother used to take me there, and I'd be going through the toys looking for GI Joes and Transformers. And people had just been, when you get stuff cheap. And they would have arcades in the front, so I'd sit there and play. I think it was like Project 8-Man and Bubble Bobble and Fatal Fury. I think was one of the, and I just like Terry Bogard, man. That was my character.
Cool, man. That was cool. That was cool. It was years before I found out that you could pick more than just those three people. Versus
Joe Hayagashi,
and you had to go down below or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was like years before I said, "Oh, you can pick more than these three guys. That's incredible."
But and it's funny because I know that you listen to like other YouTubers and stuff who lived in different parts of the world, and they talk about like the things they got a hold of or what they could play. But it's like, we missed a lot. I mean, there was so much we played arcade wise, but there was a lot of things like we never got here, like at least at anywhere around in Houston that I could play at. But I remember when Virtua Fighter came out.
Oh, I knew you were going to say Virtua Fighter.
Dude, Virtua Fighter, like that was technically that was the first game I remember playing that was 3D fighter.
Yeah, that was
the old 3D, like mind blowing.
Yeah, it was. It was. I played that at it wasn't called Zumba back then, or 59, the little golf course arcade place. What was it?
Celebration Station.
Celebration Station.
Yeah.
Celebration. That's
Have you driven by there lately? Have you driven by there lately?
Yeah, it's
sad.
It breaks my heart. It's still there. Everything's still there, but it's run down. That's where I remember seeing Virtua
Should
Fighter.
buy it.
I know, right? We should just do the podcast out of.
It.
We'll just rename
it. Podcast money and go buy Celebration Station.
Yeah, it's going to be the dad level arcade or something.
Yeah, probably cost like $500,000 just to get it up to code or
Just to
whatever.
clean it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, just to clean it.
You talk about Virtual Fighter, it also makes me think about just in general Sega cabinets, right? Like
Oh yeah.
Sega, I mean, they're like the Mercedes Benz, like they took it to a whole different level. Because you had, your standard, wooden Street Fighter cabinet. Okay, it looks good,
Yeah.
standard joy. Sega had to take it to a whole different level. These beautiful, pristine, nice
Yeah.
It had that space between you and the screen.
Yeah.
Pedestal. It was just like, whoa, like little LED lights on the side. It was sweet.
Well, and like a lot of the gimmicks too, or like the, like we were talking before, and Space Harrier, where Afterburner, and you're like the cockpit's moving and everything, and while you're playing, that stuff was fun. But yeah, who did y'all play on?
You always play the Ryu character. That's
Akira.
Pick a game. The first guy you're gonna get
Ryu.
Who's the closest to Ryu, and that's who you're gonna play.
It's funny you ask that because I don't even remember. Honestly, Vince, that's how not memorable the characters were. I don't remember any of the characters. Like there was one that looked like Ryu, one that kind of looked like Chun-Li. Like you're right. It wasn't. You didn't walk away. Like if you asked me name all the characters of Street Fighter, no problem. I got it. Like it's easy, right? But that's another thought, right? Like
what was it?
The characters were memorable.
So Akira, Jackie, Jeffrey, Sarah, Cage.
Jeffrey's who I used. I know.
Wolf.
Yeah, Jeffrey.
Oh, Wolf.
Is that the
Dreads?
Jeffrey is the Dreads guy.
Yeah. He was like the wrestler kind of.
I was getting those two mixed up.
Yeah, I know that. I can't remember I can't remember the girl that was the one that was like giant Chun-Li.
The girl was Pi.
Pi.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah,
that's right.
You
have better memory than I do.
The older guy, I don't remember the older.
But Akira and Jackie were the two people I played. Like, because
it
was like
the Ken and Ryu approximation.
Yeah, and I think what got me with Jackie was the fact that he was, his style was Jet Kundo, so it was like Bruce Lee style.
That didn't come through in the earlier games. It
it wasn't until later on, like 4 or 5
to 3, 4, and 5. Maybe okay, this is what that
now
was.
You starting to see kind of the movement, right?
The stiff movement wasn't really giving me move like water. It was just giving me.
Yeah, the whole game was like knock your opponent out. The whole thing was like you would kite him around till like you get him to the edge, and then you would just do a move and knock him out.
Yeah, but that was a cool mechanic. Speaking of what Alexander just talked about, maybe that was a secret sauce for Street Fighter with the characters, man. It was just you looked at them, you attached to one of them, and you knew them for the rest of your life. Maybe that's why Virtual Fighter isn't as popular today, is because the characters weren't very memorable, and even Tekken, has more memorable characters.
Oh yeah, Tekken.
They were outlandish and stuff. So,
and that's another one that Tekken, like when that first came out, that was like mind blowing because I mean, there was so much more versatility to the characters and everything that you're playing with that, and then like there was like it felt like the martial art style was kind of real, like these characters in the first one. Now it's like the newer ones, it's like. This is kind of made up. I don't know.
Well, some of it looks weird until they're spinning in midair and bouncing off the ground. And, then it's like, all right, guys.
I think my first character I played was Law because of Bruce Lee. And
that's when it really. I mean, you look at Tekken and okay, this is like a Bruce Lee guy.
Yeah,
instantly.
It was an easy
connection. Easy, yeah.
Whatever they were doing with the animations and the textures, all that stuff came through and made it really distinct. Even today, like a lot of the Tekken animations that you'd see in Tekken 7 are from Tekken 2, but it still looks really good. It still looks really good.
Yeah, good. And speaking of games that I remember when they came on the PlayStation, they were pretty dang close to like arcade perfect. And I remember that was one of the things that was cool about those games, like how you unlocked a new character. Yeah, and there was tons of characters you can unlock. Was actually playing through and beating it with every character, and that allowed you to learn the characters and learn what their abilities were. Versus like you play Street Fighter and stuff, their characters are already there.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I always like look forward to when the next Tekken came out, was that being able to unlock new characters.
Yeah. Wasn't that on the? I think in the arcade it was like, maybe it was depending on what the setting was, but I think in the arcade it was like there was a timed release for the characters.
Yeah.
And on PlayStation it was like you beat the game with this guy and you get this guy.
And you get a new character.
Yeah, and you get a new
that
character.
guy.
But I do
you
remember
found all the
like
cheat codes.
going back to the arcade and being like, oh, who's released this week? That type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, speaking of Tekken was a big part of my life. I mean, it still is now, but when Tekken Tag came out, I mean, that was the thing. When we would go to, like, right after school to go to Supertrack and play competitively against people. And that brings a whole other topic in, and we'll get to that too, the difference between what it was like being in the arcade versus at home play or online play. But you know, I remember, what was it, back when we had the toss test, you know, if you passed it your sophomore year, you didn't have to take it for your junior or senior year. So like those 2 years, it was like, oh yeah, you don't have to be in school for like those the days we're testing. So we would just go into school to do what we needed to do, and then once we were let out, Supertrack.
Yeah.
And then I remember it was funny because when Tekken Tag came out on the PS2 when it first launched, I was like, I'd sit at home playing, trying to figure out moves for different characters, and then I would implement it while I was in the arcade, because it was all about getting better for the arcade.
Yeah. It was a great time. You know, as soon as he says Tekken Tag, I don't know about you guys, but as soon as Vince said Tekken Tag, these two fingers come up for some reason. Every time someone says Tekken Tag, like, oh, I got to switch characters, got to press those 2 buttons, right? So, you know, like for me, when I think about the arcade, something that I miss the most is so silly, but the fact that when you walked up to a fighting machine, especially something like Tekken Tag, and you wanted to wait for your next play, what did you do to indicate that you were interested in playing next? Do you remember?
You put the quarter
quarter on the top, like that. To me, that was just like such a cool concept. Like at any moment, I could just put this quarter on the top and I can challenge whoever is at that machine, and I could be the king of that machine for that moment, right? So, and then there was like this anxiety that built up, and you're like, okay, what am I gonna do? I'm watching his moves, I'm watching what they're doing. Okay, I'm gonna use this character because I know that'll be the best, strategy against that particular lineup that he has. And the fact that you had 2 characters, that dynamic was completely different, right? So, yeah, you're right. It was, the arcade is something that I'm afraid we won't have like that style of gameplay anymore, because because of the current situation with the pandemic, whatever little bit of that arcade we had is kind of gone now. People are really afraid to go out and you're going to be that close to somebody playing a machine. That's going to be tough, right? But I try to play friends online. I try to play at home on the console. It's not the same. It's not that. You don't hear that sound of that button. You don't. Your elbows aren't moving. You know, it's not that vibe. The arcade. The other background noises. Vince in my ear. Dude, jump, go back, block. You got him. Like, it's just all of that. All of that combined is what made fighting games so intense, so exciting, right? And then I thought about like, how did they take that energy, all of that energy, and put it into a console? The only game I felt that level of energy, like fighting game wise, was Power Stone on Dreamcast.
Power Stone's good. I remember seeing Power Stone in the EB games when the Dreamcast, before the Dreamcast was out. Maybe they imported it or something. Being really impressed with that game. And even in that EB games, there was an arcade-like feel because everybody was surrounding it. I don't know if you remember, they used to have in EB games, the monitors would be way up close to the ceiling and stuff. So everybody was like
this.
Everybody playing like this. Like, all right, well, it's better than nothing. And then everybody was surrounding this game to get their turn on it. And I missed that a lot. Just just being around people in front of an arcade cabinet, everybody waiting their turn to do it. It's just one of those things from like childhood or whatever that's kind of gone even before the pandemic. I went to my first Evo in 2019 And I just took it in. It's home. And that's like, I missed it so much, just being around people, you know, playing fighting games. And hopefully maybe we can get a little bit. I mean, it had been so beaten up, or it had been so reduced even before the pandemic. So now after, you know, who knows if we'll even have fighting game tournaments where you can go to and get a little bit of that feel back. You know, it's kind of sad, but
you just gotta hope for the best.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. Mostly online. People want to play online, and it was just like, you know, I would see fights just like everybody else. You'd see fights at the arcade, fist fights, but it was few and far between because people weren't like,
well, let's take it to the stick, man.
You know, some people would take it to the next level. You know, they get off a couple punches and everybody break them up, but nobody would leave. Nobody would
it's like we're going right back to playing.
Those same people would still get back on the machine and stuff like that. So it wasn't like this super violence or anything like that. The same people would just get back on the machine. I miss that, man. I miss that. Hey, if you want to talk trash, you have to talk it to somebody's face, and if you're not going to back it up, hey, just play the game. That type of thing. It was really good. It was really good.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. Like, if you just think about how people deal with conflict now, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, we were more in that time period. We were more to your point, like, hey, Vince, like, let's take this out on the machine. Let's
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it was funny because it was like this beef, you know, it's like, oh, yeah, like the PlayStation versus, you know, Xbox wars and the Sega versus Nintendo wars, and people would talk all this junk. Well, I have a bigger processor. It was almost like you were the machine.
Yeah.
It's like, well, let's go play it and let's compare and contrast. And that was funny. That was just like a fun way to compete with each other. You know, and to your point, it was less violent. It was competitive. What I think it was, and now they call that esports, right? I think that was the foundation of what people consider esports, because, you know, for kids who aren't super athletic, like, I enjoy inline skating. It's really a competitive sport, right? So I can barely hoop to save my life. I'll play a little basketball. We can play 21, but, you know, I'd rather just go to the arcade with Vince and let's play some Tekken. Let's do that. And that's perfectly fine. There's still the social aspect of it. I think for me, when it comes to fighting games, that social aspect's kind of gone. You know, we could play online and we could talk to our mics, but it's nowhere near the same of us being elbow to elbow in that arcade machine.
Well, and that's where like and that's one of the things that, again, it's sad about the pandemic, because I can't have people over. But like, if anybody who knows me, you know, it was always about, we'd go to the arcade and then come back to my house and continue what we were doing. And, you know, even now, I mean, like, well, not now, but before the pandemic, I'd have, you know, Edward, and Alex, and Adrian over, and you know, all my other buddies I used to play with. I mean, Ricky, and we just sit there and play. We do tournaments. I mean, there's times like I'll do a tournament. I'm like, okay, I'll pick up something, and I'm like, hey, whoever wins the tournament's going to get this prize. There's actually a video on the channel that's like that. But you know, I just remember when, like, I remember in school, and I'd be in class with like David or Ricky or Josh Martinez or a couple other people that we used to play with, Jonathan Cutshaw, and we'd sit there playing, and like, or like we would sit in class, and like David and a couple of the guys would have like a piece of paper with the button layout, and they would sit in class trying to practice the moves for the characters they were playing.
It's so true.
So that way, when they got to the arcade, bam, bam, bam. Because it was funny, because like Josh would he'd play Harangue back in, you know, with Tekken Tag, and he figured out this infinite hit combo, and it was great when we would cheer him on, come on, do it, and then he would do it, and it was awesome. But you know, I remember us going to Tilt and playing whatever was there, or us going to Wizard, and there's a whole episode that we need to talk about, literally just about arcading in general. But I remember just that period of time, like between 99 and like 2005, like us just going to the arcade, even if it was like the student center at U of H, playing fighting games. And that was a really good time, because we had SNK versus Capcom 1 and 2. And then you had the X-Men versus Street Fighter, you know, Marvel versus Capcom 1 and 2, and
I thought that game was a myth, by the way. Marvel versus Capcom.
Capcom.
Yeah.
People were telling me about it. I was like, man, you guys are full of it, man. This game doesn't exist. And that's why I saw it the first time, because they were, it was like one of those schoolyard things, and it's got Mega Man and it's got Venom.
I couldn't believe
this game doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I saw it for the first time. It was incredible. It was incredible.
And all those hidden characters in there.
All the hidden characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what's funny is that like Alex's name. So like when we did Akuma's Cave, our website and stuff, on the forum, his name was like Tech Akuma, and it was like because in Capcom versus Marvel, like you'd fight like this mechanized Akuma in the game, and it's like that's like awesome character. So he's like, he took that name.
I'm glad you brought up the student center, because I'm thinking of the layout, right? You had X-Men, Street Fighter, Marvel vs. Capcom, Capcom SNK. You had so many machines, but there was one machine that only that place had that I'd never seen anywhere else, which was Rival Schools.
Dude, and they still have it now. At least I think they did. I think they still have it now.
Underrated title.
Rival Schools was great.
Yeah, great machine.
You talk about games that like got arcade ports in Japan and then we never got here. Rival Schools is one of them.
Big one.
I can't think of some of the other ones, but
I know Total 2. I don't think that was an arcade though, but
what was it? Air Guys. Air Guys was an arcade. Yeah, Air Guys was an arcade. I know Street Fighter 4 had an arcade machine in Japan. There was a guy that was
we eventually got it here.
Yeah.
A version of Street Fighter 4 in arcade. Yeah.
But like, talk about cool little innovation. Like when Tekken 5 came out, they had the ability to allow you to hook up your own PS1 controller or PS2 controller, so you can play with a controller or the joystick.
Oh, that was ridiculous.
And Vince, what was the name of that arcade that was in Midtown? That tiny little arcade that had all the Japanese cabinets. And it had the lolly cup or like the tapioca tea place on the side of it.
Okay. So the funny thing about that is, and this is really a callback to Houston Pacific, because the guy who owned that place originally opened up a place called Planet Anime. It was off of the Rice Village. I got to remember what the name of that place is, the arcade. But like, I remember I went there like 3 or 4 times. I think the first time I went there was with Jonathan and Ricky and one other person, and we were playing like Third Strike and because it was very niche. It was like, I think they rotated out arcade machines. They actually had some that were some consoles hooked up and everything, but that was really cool. I mean, they had like anime stuff all over and collectibles. But yeah, there was a time that like Houston was like the perfect place to be for arcade scenes and stuff like that. Adrian, like what were some of the places you used to go to on your side of town?
Well, growing up, we stayed all over the place. And I remember, so when we used to stay on the north side of town in Acres Homes, there was a convenience store that had all the arcade games. And I don't know who the owner was, but when I say they had the arcade games, they had the latest stuff. Like whatever was hot on the streets, those guys had it. And it was unbelievable. So I was like, they're not phoning this in. They're not letting somebody come and tell them. They're like going out and getting these things. Like the Street Fighters, like World Heroes 2 Jet, Fatal Fury, World Heroes Jet. Like, I'm like, how do y'all have World Heroes 2 Jet and nobody else? I've never seen this outside this place. Like Killer Instinct, when Killer Instinct 2 first came to the arcades, they had that.
And we didn't even talk about
that. They had Mortal Kombat 3 the first time it came to arcade. I was like, man. And so like convenience stores was mostly like the Celebration Station when that was there. You hit up Funplex a few times. I don't know if y'all remember the old Funplex.
Yeah.
And it was in that Suds's place I was telling you about, had a big impact. That was the Suds's place was my main arcade, like 4th, 5th grade when it was shortly after. I remember I played Street Fighter 2 for the first time in like a Circle K or something. But after that, that was the place where I went to play Street Fighter. And like the Chuck E. Cheese, the Showbiz Pizza back then, actually, and stuff like that. and I really didn't have. It was just like whatever was in the neighborhood,
Mm.
and not until by the time I got old enough where I could go to where I could probably go to places, I didn't really know where the scenes were at that point, like other than, you know, the laundromat. I remember there was a laundromat in the Harlem Clark area where it was crowds of people would come in there, especially when they got Marvel vs. Capcom 2. There was like crowds of guys waiting to queue up on that game. And I would walk over. It was within walking distance, so I would walk over there to that laundromat and get a couple games in of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and the guys would come in there. But yeah, at that time I didn't know, like at my school, I went to Madison High School, and like there weren't a whole lot of people that were into that scene, so I didn't really have like a friend group that was just playing. I had a friend group that was playing different games and stuff like that, but fighting games specifically, not a whole lot. So just I was mostly like wherever I could find it, really. You know?
Yeah, because I was like Tilted Alameda Mall, Tilted Baybrook Mall, Tilted Pasadena Town Square,
Mm-hmm.
Wizard, which was okay. Wizard was great. So like Alex has got some great stories about this, but it was really cool because it was basically like on a small strip center with a convenience store.
Mm-hmm.
And you go in and there'd be a lot of retro arcades on the right. You'd have the booth where the guy would give out the change. There'd be some change machines by the door. And then around the corner was all the new stuff. But it was in this big area. And all of the older games were like, what, 25 cents unlimited play or something like that. But like the newer games, you know, were 50 cents. And it was really cool because Alex, you want to tell that story about like how he would give out the change. It was just like he wouldn't even look. He put down like $20. He wouldn't even look. He just like, all right, there's your quarters.
Just knew, like
he just knew what you put on the
I don't know if he just had that peripheral vision, but he put a 5 there, and he would. And the way that he distributed the money, he'd do it in dollars. So it'd be a set of 4, set of 4, set of 4, like, and he would do it so smoothly. And unfortunately, you know, that man passed away, and he was a really nice guy. He didn't talk much, but he used to cash checks there. So I don't know, like, if he just had a lot of money on hand at all times because the place was robbed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then immediately, once it was robbed, it just shut down. And it left this huge hole because he had a lot of great new machines, to Vince's point. And then we would go to Pasadena Town Square Mall, and they wouldn't have a lot of the same machines, and then it'd be double the price.
Yeah.
So it like changed that, you know, our gameplay there. And yeah, you forgot about the Galleria. We used to go there too.
The Galleria. Yeah. And then but like Supertrack didn't close until I think 2006. You know, and
Supertrack?
No, but I knew people who did. I wanted to.
I feel like everybody did. I thought you did too.
No.
Everybody knew about Supertrack, I think. I think I might have been there once or twice. Yeah. And this is off 59, is that? No,
it's that's 45 Gulf Freeway. So right over there by the Hilton or hotel. And it's funny because you can actually drive by it and you'll see like kind of what the track used to be, and they actually have the main building still there. They just don't have like the eatery area and all the other stuff. But it's like, man, I'd love to like see if that building has like all those arcades inside of it. So can I go buy these?
Yeah.
But Supertrack was really cool because like you would come in, depending on which door you came in, you would either come in on like a second floor level, but it wasn't like actually like like you're on a second floor. It was kind of like an elevated area. And then you'd go up the stairs, go inside, and it would kind of like be this like octagon kind of thing that went like this. And then I did it again. And you would come down the stairs and there would be a big center area. So it was like you had a big center area and then you walk up the stairs into that, and that would be some of their like the gimmick kind of games, you know, of course, Space Area or Daytona USA, and then it was their gift thing. So if you've got tokens and stuff, you go and exchange it for, you know, prizes and stuff. They had a couple other things up there, but then they had games on the floor, and then they had the all the ticket games you could play. But I think they had like one side that was like all their old retro school stuff, and then they had their newer stuff, and then they had like an area that was for fighting games specifically. Then in like along that line, you had like Police 911. That's where like Time Crisis was, and the shooter games and stuff. I remember, and I'm going into this now, but there was so many games that we played there. I mean, I went there basically all my life, sadly. I mean, most of it because following my dad, and it was just so fun. I mean, growing up doing that stuff. But what was it? I remember it was funny because when we would go to play Tekken, there was one Tekken machine, and then there was another fighting game, and then there was Third Strike. And it was so like when I wasn't getting to play Tekken, I was playing Third Strike. But most people were just playing Tekken. They weren't playing Third Strike at the time. But it was cool getting to play Third Strike in the arcade format.
Yeah.
But talking about the Student Center at U of H, the funny thing is that was renovated, because of the flood. What was it?
It's beautiful now.
Was it Harvey or was it
I think it might have been Ike. It was one of
it was one.
It affected that whole center bad. Yeah.
Because that used to be a much bigger arcade space. And I have like memories of going there and playing with my buddy James and Alex and stuff, and playing against people. There was one exact memory I remember playing SNK versus Capcom 2, and this girl comes up and she plays me, and I'm like, okay, and I beat her, and I'm just still continuing to play, and then stuff. Her boyfriend comes over and plays, and she's like right next to him, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play and play. I beat him like 5 more times, and then he just walks off with her, and I'm like, okay, I didn't mean to make you look bad. I'm just trying to have fun. But yeah,
he didn't know what time it was.
He didn't know what time it was.
That's it, man. But yeah, I wish I had a regular hangout here.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap it up, and we can continue this conversation again another time, but favorite fighting game of all time?
I'm gonna let you guys go first. I need to mull it over.
That's a heavy question, Vince.
Heavy,
Console,
man.
arcade, it doesn't matter either.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Okay, I'll go. Tekken Tag for me. Tekken
I
Tag.
think for me would be Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2, the new challengers. Because I mean, it's just such a foundational game. It's something that, I mean, the fact that I can still play it today and still enjoy it, that speaks volumes to what it did. Yeah.
Super Street Fighter 2. Oh, man, the favorite.
I know it's hard. It's hard.
I would have to say like Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Okay.
Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Yep.
So yeah, that will probably be my one. That's the one I have most fond memories with, things like that. If the one I've had the Street Fighter I've had the most overall time with is probably Street Fighter 4, but Street Fighter 2 Turbo is the one I'm most fond of.
Yeah, and keep in mind though, it doesn't have to be like, you're not like trying to virtue signal to somebody about, the Street Fighter 2 fans are like, man, why did you pick this now?
Yeah, no, I'm not, they'll probably be mad. Somebody's with a pitchfork driving up right now. I'm looking out the window, but yeah, I've spent the most time with Street Fighter 4 only because that's probably the first real online fighting game that I ever, played. But yeah, Street Fighter 2 is probably the one that I could be like, okay, anytime I could pick up Street Fighter 2 Turbo and have a good time with it. If I picked up Street Fighter 4 right now, I don't think I would have as good a time with it at this point as I would with Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Yeah.
That would be me with Third Strike, but
I was just thinking Third Strike. I was like,
Third Strike is the.
That's what I thought everybody was going to go with Third Strike.
If we're going to talk about favorite Street Fighter game, that's Third Strike. But
isn't it funny? Like Third Strike is one of the only games that I would actually listen to the soundtrack in my car because the music was so good.
Yeah, Third Strike soundtrack was really good.
But well, we hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Continue the conversation below. Tell us what your favorite games were and your favorite fightings. I mean, your your memories. Tell us what your favorite stuff
Yeah,
was.
just tell us what the best fighting game is.
And then we may continue this conversation another time. So we hope y'all enjoyed. Have a good one.
Yeah. Take care.